Florida has enacted a new law that eases restrictions on child labor. This change has ignited a firestorm of controversy across the state. At the heart of the matter is whether this law offers a practical solution to labor shortages or exploits vulnerable minors. The law's impact on businesses, children's education, and the very fabric of Florida's workforce hangs in the balance. The new law represents a significant departure from previous regulations. It allows minors to work in a wider range of jobs and for longer hours. This change has raised concerns about the potential impact on children's well-being and their ability to succeed in school. Critics argue that the law could lead to the exploitation of minors. Supporters of the law, however, argue that it provides valuable work experience for young people. They believe it helps businesses struggling to find employees in a tight labor market. The debate highlights the complex interplay between economic needs and the protection of children's rights. This new law has ignited a debate that reaches far beyond the borders of Florida. It raises fundamental questions about the role of government in regulating labor practices and protecting the most vulnerable members of society. The genesis of Florida's new child labor law can be traced back to two interconnected factors: labor shortages and a crackdown on undocumented immigrant workers. Businesses across various sectors have reported difficulties finding enough employees to meet their needs. This shortage has been attributed in part to Florida's stricter immigration policies, which have made it more challenging for businesses to hire undocumented workers. Faced with these challenges, some businesses have turned to alternative sources of labor, including teenagers. Proponents of the new law argue that it simply provides a legal framework for businesses to fill vacant positions with willing young workers. They contend that it empowers teenagers to gain valuable work experience and contribute to the economy. However, critics argue that the law is a misguided attempt to address a problem rooted in broader economic and social issues. They contend that it exploits children by pushing them into the workforce prematurely. They also express concern that businesses may prioritize hiring cheaper child labor over paying adult workers a fair wage. The intersection of labor shortages and immigration policies has created a complex dilemma for Florida. The new child labor law is an attempt to address this dilemma, but it has sparked a heated debate about its potential consequences. Florida's new child labor law introduces a number of significant changes to the state's existing regulations. One of the most notable changes is the relaxation of restrictions on the number of hours that 14 and 15-year-olds can work during school days. Previously, these minors were limited in the number of hours they could work while school was in session. The new law loosens these restrictions, raising concerns about the potential impact on children's education. Another significant change is the elimination of the requirement for parental consent for minors to be employed. Under the previous law, parents or guardians had to provide consent before a minor could be hired for a job. The new law removes this requirement, raising concerns that children may be more vulnerable to exploitation. These changes have far-reaching implications for businesses, children, and the state's education system. Businesses, particularly those in industries, may benefit from the increased availability of young labor. However, critics argue that these changes come at the expense of children's well-being and their future prospects. The elimination of parental consent requirements raises concerns about the potential for coercion and exploitation. Without the safeguard of parental approval, children may be more susceptible to pressure from employers to work excessive hours or engage in unsafe working conditions. Florida's new child labor law has divided the state, with passionate arguments both for and against the changes. Supporters of the law, including business groups and some lawmakers, argue that it provides much-needed relief for businesses struggling to find workers. They contend that the law allows teenagers to gain valuable work experience, learn responsibility, and develop essential life skills. Furthermore, proponents argue that the law gives teenagers more control over their own lives and allows them to contribute to their family's finances. They believe that the previous restrictions were overly burdensome and that the new law strikes a better balance between protecting children and allowing them to work. However, critics of the law, including child advocacy groups, educators, and labor unions, argue that it puts children at risk of exploitation and jeopardizes their education. They contend that the law prioritizes the needs of businesses over the well-being of children. Opponents argue that longer work hours will leave teenagers with less time for schoolwork, extracurricular activities, and essential rest, ultimately harming their educational attainment and future prospects. The debate over Florida's new child labor law reflects a broader national conversation about the balance between economic needs and the protection of children's rights. As the law takes effect, its impact on Florida's businesses, children, and education system will be closely watched.